Welcome to the Death Happens podcast, an insider's guide to dying. We're your insiders. I'm hospice nurse Penny.
And I'm Halley, hospice social worker.
Today's guest is Katrina Spade. Katrina is the founder of Recompose, a body composting facility in Seattle, Washington. We are so excited to talk to her about all the things that you have to do to turn the human body into compost.
For sure. Yeah, but before we do that, we're going to transition. We talked a little bit about this in our last episode. We're going to go from hot topics to more of an educational platform. And of course, we'll have individual episodes next season and even one at the end where it's just me and Penny, and we educate you on a broader topic in a little more detail. But for these episodes with guests, we're still going to do a little bit of an education piece.
Right. That's because we are the insiders and we want to give you the inside scoop on hospice, death, and dying. So today we want to talk about the levels of care in hospice. Specifically, we want to focus on continuous care.
Yes. So it is funny because it is a little bit of a hot topic. It's come up for you. I know you've done a episode on TikTok about that. And it's also come up in the social worker Facebook group for hospice, which is interesting, just this week. So I'm hearing these rumors that some organizations, some hospices are telling their employees that they're not doing continuous care. We don't do that.
Right. So in my organization, we do that, but we shy away from it quite a bit. We know that we have to offer that. It's part of the Medicare requirement to be a Medicare licensed hospice agency. You have to offer continuous care. So continuous care is when somebody has symptoms that are not being managed well at home for whatever reason. Sometimes they need to have an infusion started or just made many changes to their medications and frequent assessments by a skilled nurse. We are able to offer continuous care, which is an 8-hour period of time minimum within 24 hours. It does not have to be 8 continuous hours. It can be blocks of 4 hours, or 2, and 4. And it can also incorporate the hospice aid. And although the Medicare conditions of participation are a little blurry on the guidelines for that, they basically say that the hospice aid services cannot be 50% or more. It has to be less than that. So they're a little bit, it's kind of a gray area, but it can include hospice aid care as well. One of the reasons why many agencies do not offer continuous care, speaking from experience from the agencies I've worked at, is that it is extremely difficult to staff for continuous care. You have to have nurses on standby, and that can be very costly if you're a small agency and you're paying nurses to be on standby. That can really start to impact your finances, and because hospice isn't very they don't pay a lot.
It's not reimbursed very well.
Yeah, we're not reimbursed very well. It's really a challenge, especially for small agencies.
So I think this is a little bit more behind the scenes, and maybe we can get into this in next season, having a longer discussion of all the levels of care. I think it is important for people to know, because it's not like it's a state secret. It's out there. It's for the world to see. You can look these regulations up. But it is bothersome. I totally understand, especially coming from a smaller agency, that it is very difficult. But to say and to put out to your staff, we don't even offer this. It's not like, hey, this is hard, try to avoid it, or try to get ahead of it and be preemptive and try not to get someone into a place of needing continuous care, because none of us want that. The clinicians don't want that. The families don't want that. The patients sure don't want that. And so, like you said, you're in a place where you're needing that constant nursing care for X amount of hours to get symptoms under control while you're still in the home.
Yeah, and since people might wonder like what kind of symptoms would need to be managed, I can give an example of a situation where we did continuous care for my patient, and really it was a little bit of a challenge to be able to pull together the right staff. I actually did most of it during the day, and then float nurses went and saw my patients, and then we grabbed an LPN out of the office who was working our medication desk getting orders from doctors, and we pulled her out and said, go home and go to sleep, because you're going to come back tonight and do this continuous care for my patient. But she was agitated. She was a younger woman. She was in her parents' home. She was very agitated. We were giving her all kinds of medications to try to get her agitation under control. And we ended up needing to do palliative sedation, and the medications that we were giving weren't sedating her. So we just had to keep escalating on what we were doing for her. And I did talk to them about another level of care we offer called GIP, general inpatient, sending her to a hospice care facility
or a hospital.
Or a hospital. And the family was absolutely, adamant that she was not going to want to go anywhere. She wanted to die in their home. And so we did what we could do to get everybody in there that we needed to get in there. And we did do continuous care.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to say it's pretty rare. I think even though in our organization, there's certainly never been a question of whether we would offer it or not, but it's pretty rare that it's needed. The challenge is that you do have certain diseases that just are a real bitch. And then you have instances where, family or patients may be a little reluctant to get ahead of things. And then once you start chasing symptoms, it takes a while to get it back under control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. It's better to stay on top of things, or to stay ahead of things, than it is to try to go on top and squish them down. It's harder to manage those symptoms. So yes.
Well, as much as I've loved talking about hot topics, I actually really love this education piece. I think it's our passion.
Yes.
I think you can tell even as we're talking right now, it's like I'm excited to be bringing this information to people. So I'm excited about next season, especially incorporating that more.
Yep, me too. All right, so let's get to our guest today.
Let's do it.
Hello and welcome, Katrina. I'm so happy to have you here. I was so impressed with the speech that you gave at the Endwell conference last fall. I was just fascinated by your story and what you do at Recompose. So why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Let's see. I'm I'm the founder and CEO of Recompose. I'm also a parent to 2 teenagers.
Been there.
That's probably harder than CEO.
Yeah, right. Today that feels important to say for some reason. And actually, they've been with me along the whole journey, most of their lives anyway, of coming up with this idea and putting it out into the world. So, though they can be challenging, I thank them for their cheerleading.
Well, and happy Mother's Day a week ago.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I just have to say, I have a belief about teenagerdom. We love our kids so much, and they turn into teenagers so that we can feel good about kicking them out and letting them fly on their own.
Yeah, someone just told me the other day, I'm going to get the part of the brain wrong, but like, you don't think of yourself as a parent. You think of yourself as like a loner frontal cortex or whatever to your kids. Like you're helping them out by loaning them that piece of brain. That sounds about right.
So do you have a degree in architecture? Is that right?
That's right. I went back to school a bit late. I was 31 or 32. And I finally realized that like I was doing design work on my nights and weekends as a hobby, but I didn't have a particular career at that point. So my mom kept urging me to go back to school. So I did. And that's where what Recompose came out of, was that design study.
So Recompose, body composting. Tell us about the process.
Well, before you get to process, I'd love to know, do you prefer body composting, terramation? I've heard different
that's a good
things
question.
of what this is called.
Definitely prefer body composting, or human composting is the phrase we use at Recompose. We've come around, thinking about different words, and the legal term is natural organic reduction, which is a mouthful and great as a legal term. But in the end, what we've found is anytime the media picks up the story, which is anytime that happens, it's great because we want to share that this option is available. They're going to say human composting. So we can call it whatever we want, but in the end, it's very accurate also. It's a very accurate term. And we do at Recompose, we like to be clear and accurate whenever possible.
I love that.
So
right
human
in our vein.
composting, it's sticking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where did the word terramation come from, and who uses that?
Yeah, that's one of our competitors, and I believe it's trademarked, so I can't even use it.
Oh,
Oh,
there we go. I didn't know that.
interesting.
That one.
Oh, wow. Well, I like body composting too, because I love the direct, like, let's not try to sugarcoat things. It is what it is. And so what is it?
Great question.
I know what
All
it is,
right.
but
Yeah.
for people listening.
So my sort of favorite high level thinking about what human composting is it's taking what happens in nature, say on the forest floor, all over the world, dead organic material, your sticks, your leaves, your chipmunks are decomposing naturally to create topsoil. And in nature, that takes a while, and it happens, with the moisture of the rain and the breeze coming through, providing oxygen to the microbes. What human composting is taking that natural process and using our human ingenuity to speed it up a little and to monitor and keep it a very well run process. So composting, any kind of composting, is a human run process. Natural decomposition is what happens in nature. Composting means humans are getting their hands on it and are making it happen even better, or even often that means faster. Sometimes it just means more consistent. Okay, so if you think about human composting, if you're imagining what's happening on the forest floor with your sticks and leaves and chipmunks, Recompose is placing a body into a vessel with wood chips, alfalfa, and straw. You can think of that plant material. No chipmunks. Although we can place ashes from cremation, including pet cremations. So there you go. It's sort of like
Perfect.
chipmunk adjacent. Yeah. So we've over years tailored our recipe to be the perfect mix of carbon and nitrogen materials. Again, that's wood chips, alfalfa, and straw. And it's essentially playing the role of the sticks and leaves and pine needles in the forest. So we lay a bed of that material, place the person's body on top of it, and then cover it with more of the same. So in that vessel, you are cocooned in plant material. And not a whole lot is happening besides lots and lots of microbial activity in that vessel. Recompose provides air to the microbes through a basic fan system. And then about a week into the process, we rotate the vessel slowly to make sure everything is mixed up and oxygen is critical so that the air can reach everywhere. But other than that, we're really creating the perfect environment for nature to do the work.
I love it so much. Fascinated by this.
So millions of questions. Okay. So do they go in there naked? I mean, I would think if you put them in clothes, the clothes are going to break down and it's going to kind of contaminate the soil. So are they in there naked? Can they be if they want to be? Or
I had this feeling that would be your first question. So when we receive a body at Recompose, and by the way, our facility is in Seattle, Washington, and about 30% of our clients come from out of state. So receiving a body might mean someone drives you from nearby. It might mean we've picked you up at the airport because your family has sent you from pick a place anywhere in the country. When we pick bodies up, of course, they are in all sorts of outfits. We then change them into a basic linen shroud for their time at Recompose. And after we've placed the body into the vessel, the last thing we do before we close that door is we take the shroud off. So indeed, you are composted as naked as the day you were born.
I think I'd want to go that way anyway. I like the idea of being in there. It's funny because as a child, I used to think being buried would be horrible, like being under the ground would be terrible. And so I definitely, and I do not want to be embalmed. And then I leaned towards cremation. But now, as this body composting is, gaining in popularity, and I live in Washington State, I've told my husband, like, I want to be composted.
I'm
Oops.
glad to say we can help you with that.
Yeah.
Some
So once the body, how long does it take for the body to compost?
So it takes, everybody is different.
Mhm.
It takes between 2 and 3 months start to finish.
Okay. And then how much, so then when it's all composted, then obviously there's still bones left in there, correct?
So not quite. Midway through this process, between actually at about 30 days, so about a month in, our team removes soil and bone and non-organics, if you have a titanium hip or something else, from the
Okay.
vessel. And then we have a stage where the non-organics are recycled. We reduce the bone mechanically, so all the way down to, like, it's sort of like a sand-like material, because if you know, cremation remains are crushed bone, but they're powdery, more like. Because composting is a different kind of quality, and to be honest, it has a lot to do with the moisture that remains. The bone, reduced bone, is very sand-like. So that sand-like bone gets reincorporated with the soil, and for the next couple of weeks, it's curing in a different container, essentially. So
Okay,
there's three phases.
You're not going to be
phase.
ready for this question.
I bet
when you open the box to take the bones out, does it smell bad?
Well, that is the number 3 question, I guess. No, naked usually comes later. That's usually number 2. No, so the amazing thing about compost is, if it's done right, it should smell good. Now, I was obsessed with the odor of this at the beginning of the design process. I mean, obsessed with it, because I thought, if I'm going to propose that people compost their loved ones, and then anything in the process smells bad, that's going to be a very tough sell, essentially. So again, a good composting process has microbes so active that there's not a lot of chance for bad odor to be produced. That's number 1. And we're like I said, we're highly managing this decomposition process. During the in-vessel time, we also have a pretty extensive biofiltration system. So the air that we're pulling through the vessels is running through an extensive biofiltration system. And a lot of that is because we started in Seattle. The Puget Sound Clean Air Agency is extremely rigorous for both like any kind of gases, which we don't produce, but also for odor. So we actually got to start with the most rigorous, like, odor agency in the country, which is great, because now we've got the system that knows how to handle odors. I would say there might be periods during that vessel time when you wouldn't want to open it up and take a deep breath. But by the time the process, this composting has completed at the mid stage, it's smelling good.
Okay, so I kind of cut you off before you finished this, because there's more stages, it sounds like. So you grind the bones up, they go back into, and you've moved now the person, or what's left of them, into a different vessel, right? With the bones in there. And then what happens after that?
So about 2 to 4 weeks of curing. Curing is a compost term. It means drying out and the microbial activity completes. And so what we see, and I hadn't mentioned this yet, but one of the indicators to us that this is all working well is temperature. So if you've ever been around a compost, like, have you ever seen a mulch pile steaming in the winter?
Yeah.
That's because heat's being created by microbial activity.
Yeah.
We place a body into, ambient temperature plant materials. The body's been cooled, almost always in cooled storage. So it's at maybe 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 48 degrees Fahrenheit. The plant material might be 65 degrees Fahrenheit. 6 to 12 hours after we've placed the body in the vessel, the temperature readout inside the vessel is about 150 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
And that spike tells us that, again, we've created this perfect environment. The microbes are getting their work started, and we see this this spike in temperature. And then by law, we need to see it hover above 131 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 full days consecutively.
Oh.
That's
I have 10,000 questions right now.
10,000. Okay.
Okay, by law. Was there even a law before you were existed?
No, we helped make the law.
That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. So it exists now. In fact, last week I went to Maryland and I was part of the governor's signing of the 9th state bill. Woo!
Wow,
That's
that's awesome.
amazing.
Yeah. So it's quite quick. I have some really good friends who've advised me on the legal front. And one of them in particular, Tanya Marsh, she's a professor of like cemetery and funeral law. And she's helped me from the beginning with all this. And she was like, no part of me thought you'd have even 3 states,
Yeah,
this soon.
this is
So
quick.
there's a lot of interest. Yeah.
You're the OG though.
Yeah,
You're the first one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you in the country are the first one who did this, right?
Yep.
That's
I have a theory
amazing.
if you want to know about
Yeah.
how ideas work. Actually,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
have to
because
give.
I'm thinking, how the hell did you go from architecture
Yeah.
to body
Yes!
composition? And yet I do know a little bit about that from what you said at the conference last fall, and I was just fascinated. So, but yeah, tell us.
Okay, so let's see. So first of all, there's a great book called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love, which I don't know that I've read that one, but
Okay.
you've heard of it. She also wrote this book called Big Magic. And the concept of big magic is that ideas are their own entities and they're out there in the world. And sometimes one lands on you and you go like, oh, that's really interesting. I have the energy and the interest in moving this forward. And I think of human composting as that. Like, I'm pretty certain. So farmers have been composting livestock for decades now. And I'm certain that many of them have thought, what a great process. I should do that. Someone should do this with humans. So I don't think I was the first person to consider the idea. But when it landed on me in graduate school for architecture, I was like, cool, like let's explore this concept. And it was great. Being in architecture school, I meant I had the luxury of time to think about what I would want. And I did start because I was like, I don't really want to be cremated and I don't want to be buried. So why isn't there anything else? And as I started to think about that and look at the American funeral industry as this system that humans have created, and that's why it's related to architecture at all, is it's not a building, but it's like a system that, like that humans have created. And I started to think about the need in urban settings for something that wasn't cremation. Because we can't have burial very easily in urban settings. There's not enough land. Can't have natural burial even, which I think is perfect process. But you need land. So what do you do with those billions of people?
I have land.
You have land.
I have 40
acres.
I have 40 acres in the mountains, and I'm always like, why can't I? But now I can because I also have a garden, and I've told my husband that he needs to get me composted, and I'll be in my garden.
There you go. I guess, yeah. So I found out about livestock composting as I was doing all this research, and it was quite an epiphany moment. I was like, oh, that's great. I love composting. I mean, I grew up, my parents are avid composters. I grew up knowing about the process and kind of considering it to be really important for just like an obvious thing to do, not human composting, but general composting. And then when I found out about livestock composting, I thought that seems like something we could, appropriate for humans. And so that was the exercise, and thinking from there on was like, what do humans need that livestock don't? What should come with a new disposition option? And that for me was as important as the technical, was like, okay, what else are we lacking with cremation and conventional burial today? What do people, I mean, honestly, it was pretty personal at first. It was like, I don't want to go to a funeral home. What else is there? What would I design if I could start from scratch? So anyway, this idea that I got to have land on me was something that I had the energy for. And importantly, that I would say the world had the energy for too, because had I tried to do it 10 years before, I think everyone would have been like, no, that's weird. Just no. But there's climate change. There's like such an awareness of the need for new ways of looking at everything from a climate perspective. And then I would say, and you're, I'm sure, like a perfect example of this, there's this appetite to think about the end of life more intentionally. And so then now people, when I pitched human composting in the early days, people were like, oh yeah, I would want that. Versus like,
Wow.
no, which would have happened, I think, 10 years earlier.
Yeah, I think so. I agree that your timing was really good with that. So, where do the microbes come from? Are they just naturally in the filler ingredients that you're putting in that you're putting in with the body, or do you introduce any kind of microbes into the container, the vessel?
They're on us as we speak. But the cool thing about these microbes is they won't break down a live person. And actually, I don't know what percentage of people are afraid of being cremated or buried alive, but it's a pretty serious fear, if you ask me. For those people, we can assure you that if you get placed in a vessel with a bunch of straw and wood chips, you'll just have to take a nap. There's air flowing. You might be a little itchy, I think, but you will not die.
That's a good point. Taphophobia.
Yeah.
I just did a video on that on TikTok. Taphophobia, the fear of being buried alive, and people used to put bells in their coffin and shovels and everything else. So yeah, if you're afraid of being buried alive, be body compost. But okay, so let's say if you're alive in there, are you able to like bang on the lid and people will come and get you out?
Oh yeah, and our team would run over and be like, all right.
And I'm guessing that has never happened yet.
No, it has not. That'll be a whole different story. My goodness. Yeah.
So what do you do with the okay, so what do you do with the compost? I mean, I'm guessing that's what you call it, right? Like if they're cremated, it's called cremains, but if they're composted, it's compost. So how much compost is produced, and then what happens to that compost?
Well, because we have to use a large volume of plant material, we're producing around a cubic yard of compost per person. That's a lot. That's 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. It's several hundred pounds. And that's been one of the really interesting design challenges. So I used to go, like after I came up with the idea, but before it was legal, and I still do sometimes, I would go to different elder living facilities. And I'd say like, give a presentation. This is what I'm trying to do. What do you think? You know, is it interesting to you? And then this one person, I just remember giving this presentation being like, and then we'll create about a cubic yard of compost. And Linda Wolf in the back row raised her hand and she was like, Katrina, my family does not want that compost. So we got to figure something out. And I was like, oh, okay. So what Recompose has is called our land program. And we partner with nonprofit organizations that are stewarding land and doing like either conservation, restoration, or some sort of rewilding, or a combination of all three, as part of their nonprofit work on land in Washington state. And so if your family says, I'd like a little bit of that compost, but not all of it, you can donate the rest to our land program. And it will go on not to a specific tree or a specific plot or a specific parcel, but into the forest and part of the work. And you get to really return to nature that way.
Wow.
But, you know, about half of our families come and they pick all of it up from us, and we bag it in these nice, like, topsoil sized bags and easy to move around. And that's okay too.
Okay, so I used to have a composting toilet, and you know, when you're composting with the toilet, it specifically says you can't use that compost on anything that's going to be grown for human consumption. So you can't really put it on your vegetables or anything like that. Is human compost able to be used on food, fruit trees, you know, vegetable gardens?
And the technical answer is the pathogens that are harmful are destroyed by the temperatures. We are, by law, required to meet those temperatures. And operators also have to do compost testing of batches When they open, they do the first year of every single batch. When they're successful in that year, it steps down to like monthly batches. But we send out to a third party to test for pathogen load. So this is much more rigorously attended to than your composting toilet.
Right,
and so
that makes
the technical
sense.
answer is it wouldn't harm you. But the practical answer and the sort of also recommended answer is, look, we recommend you don't put the compost on tender annuals, because we should be washing any compost off of lettuces and stuff like that, but we might not get all of it. So you don't want to eat it. I mean, we don't recommend eating it, any compost for that matter. So what we love to say is, like, put it on trees, including fruit trees, put it on, perennials, ornamentals. There's lots of use. Put it in the forest.
Okay. Yeah, you don't want to be snacking on a piece of your loved one.
No, it just,
happen to
the
get into
reality
your
is, like,
lettuce salad.
the reality is, like, the media, I used to say it would be totally fine. Yeah, how cool, so full circle. And then people got so distracted by that concept. It just took this idea that's already a little weird and it went like over here. And then
Tell me you're talking about Idaho right now. Tell me you're
Oh,
talking about the ridiculousness
but yes, that's next
about
level.
cannibalism in Idaho.
What?
So I know, Katrina, I know you know. There's no way you don't know.
You tell it.
So back in February, there was a big thing. So apparently Idaho, I don't know, they have their own weird rules. But there was a lawmaker that was bringing back up their anti-cannibalism law statute.
Okay.
And
Didn't know you
having
need
it
the law for that.
reworded. Yeah. Having it reworded. I actually wrote it down so I wouldn't get it wrong. So it says, I heard about Washington State was going to be doing human composting, and that disturbed me. I wanted to address this because what I didn't want to see was bags of compost with human bone fragments.
Wasn't there
audio
also
can't see my face right now, but
But wait,
wasn't there a body composting place recently that lost the bodies too?
Oh no, that was not a body composting place. That was they called themselves like a natural funeral home of some sort, but they didn't do composting.
Oh, like a green burial place.
Like a green burial place.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if they were doing anything besides cremation, but that was in Colorado, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, Colorado. Yeah. All right, so did we cover everything about the process? Because I want to ask
I thought you were going to say
about
zombies.
No.
Probably not.
So, because I'm really curious about the cost, the cost
Sure.
of body composting versus cremation versus natural burial or green burial versus traditional burial. I know funerals can be really fucking expensive. So
Yeah. So, high level, Recompose human composting is probably never going to be as inexpensive as your direct cremation. Because if you think of a direct cremation, number one, it takes about 4 hours or so. And it's very, it takes about 4 hours, and composting someone takes 2 to 3 months. So you just consider that time frame, and it's, it would be, I don't know what kind of corners you'd have to cut to get that to that cost, maybe $1,000 for a direct cremation. Then on the other side, you've got burial, which it's hard to find a number that includes a plot at a cemetery, but actually I would say like 15,000 is where you're going to be starting for the total cost of a conventional burial, and north of that. And then to add a little more context, I believe the average cremation with a service is around $6,000 in the US. So you've got this huge range of costs. Recompose's service that includes all of the paperwork, death certificate, pickup of the body, all of the storing and caring for the body, and then through the compost process, and includes donation if they choose to a land partner. All of that costs $7,000.
So I think that's pretty reasonable, actually. I mean, and also I think people are really leaning away from cremation. It is bad for the environment, as we know. And there's a lot of concern people raise about maybe their ashes being mixed with someone else. I'm always seeing stuff like that, like their ashes get mixed with somebody else. They didn't clean it out good enough. They gave you the wrong ashes back. There's a lot of concern there, which is probably all false. But I think the cost to me sounds pretty reasonable
Yeah, I mean,
for that.
it's a significant cost, no doubt. Any kind of funeral care, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We do have
Wow.
a community fund that we're really proud of, where we support folks who can't afford the whole service, can use that fund to get up to a certain amount reduced. Almost all
Oh,
of it
wow.
reduced, actually.
Really?
Yeah, and so what we rely on, like, our merch sales and contributions from people who, like, in lieu of flowers, can go into that community fund. So we acknowledge that
nice.
it's expensive and try to help folks who can't afford it.
Wow. That's really cool that you have that available. Halley, do you have questions?
I have so many questions. I'm trying to even remember what one I want to start with, because I know we have only a limited, amazing amount of time with you.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's too bad we can't show pictures on here, because I saw the pictures, the slides of the facility, and it's really beautiful. And I remember you talked about how you kind of incorporated your architecture degree into the design of the facility itself, and that you had like a name for, like, this portal that you put people through or something. Tell us about that.
Sure. First of all, I think partly because I personally believe design is important for how we move through, moving through the day and our experience of especially big events like someone's death. But also because it occurred to me that if I was trying to bring an idea that might feel a little bit sus, if you will, human composting, to the public, having that be designed with care, the idea is designed with care, is important. And so, for example, if you go to our website, I hope it's okay to say, it's Recompose.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we'll put the link in the show notes too.
Okay, cool.
So yes.
If you go to our website, it's www.recompose.life. You see images of soil and plants, but soil is kind of the star of the website. But it's beautifully shot. You know what I mean? So it's like, we're not saying, it's not euphemisms. We're not saying, oh, this is just about, a tree or something like that. We're saying this is about the soil, that creation of new life through soil. So thinking about design has always been important, and frankly, just a pleasure of mine. So luckily, incorporating it has been important for the company and the movement as well. But what we created at Recompose Seattle is called the threshold vessel. And we call it the threshold vessel because it's very much a doorway. It is a way to pass a body through from the gathering space, which is our kind of serene, somewhat chapel-esque space that we've created for services on site. And then at the end of the service, family and friends place the body, often place wood chips and straw and flowers and maybe moss from a favorite hike, or sometimes once it was hamburgers from a local hamburger place around the body.
I really hope it was Dick's.
It was Dick's.
I was just going to say,
yes!
Was it Dick's?
It was Dick's.
Amazing.
I think there was pizza placed once. A lot of times folks will place love letters, anything that can decompose naturally. And then that body with all of its organic material is placed into the threshold vessel. And when the door is closed, that's sort of the moment of transition, the end of the service, and the passing on of that person's body, which goes into the next room, which is where the composting occurs.
And it is beautiful. I've seen pictures of that facility. It's just lovely.
Thank you. We welcome you to come visit. We give tours. You can sign up on our website for a tour.
We're going to want to do that. We are going to want to do that.
I would love to talk about, just so people know, because of course there are things that are just exemptions. So what are some obstacles to choosing composting?
There are a couple of reasons you would not be a candidate for composting. One is if you've died of active tuberculosis. Oh no, yes, you've died and you have active tuberculosis. The second is you have Ebola, which is a very highly transmissible disease. And I think that I shouldn't, don't quote me here, but I think that might have been because when the regs were being written, there was some extra fear of Ebola. I think it might have been an extra careful regulation that was tossed in there. And I think the general thought was not very many people are dying of Ebola right now, right here. So it's okay. But I'm not entirely certain that one was necessary, but I'm okay with it. The next is a prion disease. So like, I never pronounce it right, but like Creutzfeldt-Jakob.
Creutzfeldt-Jakob.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is a type of disease that hasn't yet been proven to be broken down by composting. The nice thing about the process in general is so much research has gone into livestock composting by agricultural institutions and like departments of ecology that we have this body of research that really does tell us how well composting works to break down harmful pathogens. As a side note, when there's an outbreak of avian flu, those birds are typically composted because it is great at managing highly pathogen, high deadly pathogens.
Great.
How about COVID?
COVID is broken down by the composting process. We take care of course, our service team takes care to not get COVID in general, but you might have heard the saying as hospice folks that like a live body is more dangerous than a dead one. Typically true.
Yeah.
So
are there any medications? I mean, we live in a state with medical aid in dying. Is there any concern with medications?
So two things, or two items about that. One, if you have a radiation seed implant in your body when you die, we have to remove it, or not us, a medical facility would remove it, and then we have to hold onto your body for about 30 days before it's okay to be composted, because you don't want radiation in the compost.
Makes sense.
But with most pharmaceuticals, so going back about 6 years, we did a pilot with Washington State University. This was to show that the process was safe and effective before we took it to the legislature. And we had 6 people donate their bodies to us for that pilot. This was before it was legal commercially. And so we were doing a donation program. So I got to meet several of them before they died. I believe it was 3 of those folks actually did use the Death with Dignity medications. So we were able to track, because we knew exactly what they'd ingested on the last day. We were able to track those medications through the whole process and test how much was in the resultant compost. And we found a 95% reduction in pharmaceuticals, which, to be honest with you, is a little bit of a bonus, because most of the harm or pollution, if you will, of pharmaceuticals has to do with our waterways and our toilets, right? So death care isn't going to solve that. But it was nice for us to see that human composting indeed does take care of those pharmaceuticals. So same with, cancer drugs or anything where you think, God, this is toxic. Compost is an amazing remediator.
And my last exclusionary question, I promise I'll get onto happier topics. Is there a weight limit?
No, and not at Recompose. It was very important for us to have, when we don't charge more for larger bodies, we do have a larger vessel for bodies, I think over 350, or we have 2 of them. So, but we don't charge more or anything like that. It was important to us to be.
As a larger body, I appreciate that.
No, that was an early discussion, and we wanted to make sure that no one felt, different.
How long have you been composting bodies, and how many would you say that you've done, or like what's your annual average? Or
we just crested 400 people composted.
Nice.
So that's kind of a neat milestone. And we have 34 vessels on site at Recompose, and we have space for 54. So as we get closer to that monthly or month and a half average of 30 people, we'll increase our vessel capacity by putting more vessels in. And we're seeing an uptick every month, and I think for me, I think the biggest challenge, it's not that people aren't interested in having this for themselves. It's really that they don't know that it exists now. And that, for
Right.
example, Recompose is a full service funeral home, and you simply call us. Either, if you know someone's dying, you can call us a couple days ahead or a week ahead. You can definitely sign up for pre-compose, which is our pre-arrangement. Or you can call us on the day that someone has died. But I think a lot of it is people are like, oh yeah, human composting, that's something I'd want. And oh, I've heard that's happening. But that doesn't always translate to when someone's died, I can just pick up the phone and actually have the service.
Well, yeah, because, in hospice, we always get the name of the funeral home. That's what we ask them about. Who's the funeral home? It wouldn't have even occurred to me that, the Recompose facility would be considered the funeral home. Yeah, because you're a social worker. So you think of all of that stuff.
Yeah,
I'm
You're
just
in
a
our
nerd.
books. You're in our book.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we've tried to do is like, what is the method that by which hospice folks are sharing options? Oh, it's a physical book. Let's get in that book. Or maybe it's digital.
For us, it's a physical book. I don't know that it's every agency.
Yeah, for my agency, it's a list, and I will be making sure, because my agency I work for is very large. I won't say who it is, but we cover a lot of territory. And so I'm going to be, next time I'm at work, making sure that whoever updates that list for our social workers, I will make sure that you guys are listed on there, because I think it's amazing. And I want to try to see more people doing this.
Thank you.
I'm all about kind of like the legacy that we're leaving for I'm from the boomer generation, so wasteful, and I want to make sure that the land that we're leaving for our kids and our grandkids is not going to be polluted,
I do.
And so I love the idea. And plus, like I said, I'm a gardener. I'm a gardener, and I love gardening, and compost is my jam.
Nice. If you had a composting toilet, compost. That's like next level, I'd say.
I don't have it anymore because it was in our cabin, and when we vacationed there, it was fine to have a composting toilet because it would compost while I was gone, and we'd come back. But when we moved to our cabin, then it was like, yeah, this isn't going to work because, you have to have a period of time where you're not using it in order for it to compost. So then we went to outhouse, and now we have septic systems. So we actually live in a more normal world now.
Well, I want to make sure we give you the opportunity to tell us anything like a fun or interesting or unusual circumstance that happened during your experience with this.
Well, the Dick's Burgers.
On the front end, on the back end, whatever. Unusual request, maybe?
Dick's Burgers, though. I mean, that's pretty good.
Love it.
Yeah, that was...
Let's see. Well, you mentioned gardening, Penny, and I kind of want to mention... Well, so I love when people can donate to the nonprofits and that's great. I love that. And one of my favorite stories was of this person who died and I talked about this at the Endwell conference, actually. When he died, his sister came and picked up all of his compost from us and then brought it back to his house. And all of his neighbors came with 5-gallon buckets. He was a big gardener. They were gardeners. And they just all got some of Wayne's soil, and they all took it back to their gardens. And I love that concept because you stay in the city where you live and you stay with the people you love and you're part of that landscape. And it doesn't have to be precious either necessarily. Like it's just a weaving of you and your life and your death back into the landscape. So I just love that story so much.
I mean, it really is next level green funeral service because, like you said, green burials require land, which we're, trying to steward into the future. And this really is the better, more green way to even do that.
I think green burial is kind of perfect if you've got land, if it's in a rural setting. Like, sure, it's a little simpler. It's totally using nature in a beautiful way. But I do what's the urban equivalent? Hopefully it's composting.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can't, I have 40 acres in the mountains here in Eastern Washington, but couldn't be buried on our property. It's not legal. So you're still ending up in a cemetery somewhere, even if you do a green burial. So to me, the composting is the best way to be able to stay on my land forever.
Well, obviously you're expanding into, other states, and you have the capacity to grow where you are in Seattle. What else do you see in the future, either for Recompose or just for this green movement of options?
Well, we're really responding to a lot of enthusiasm and interest from all over the globe. And so one of the things that's been so fascinating is finding out what locations are interested in composting beyond the US. So there's no laws that have been changed yet beyond the US, but we've got a lot of interest in, like, for example, Australia. Who knew Australians would want human composting? But we were talking to folks, and we've spent a lot of time and effort on our system, developing out, the client experience. And so we're actively looking for partners who want to open up a facility in their location with the help of Recompose as partners. And I think expanding that way is going to be the future for Recompose in the next couple of years. Hopefully you'll see that, because I don't want to be just a niche option. We don't want to. I'd like to go mainstream. I think that's totally feasible.
As fast as you're growing, I think so.
Yeah. So how long have you been open?
We started operating in December 2020.
Wow. 2020. So not even 4 years in, and already 400 bodies composted.
And
That's
9
great.
states. That's incredible.
And now, are you, the 9 states, are these different facilities, or are you opening Recompose facilities in these other states?
Well, the states are tricky a little bit. So some of them have funky laws, like New York State is a little challenging to open a facility in. Some of them, like California, though the bill passed in, I think it was 2022 or 23, the law won't go into effect until 27 because the regulations still have to happen.
God.
So even though we celebrate very, hard these legalization moments, they're not always, there's usually a regulation period that follows that. So it's not like we could just open everywhere right away. And to be perfectly transparent, it costs quite a bit to open a facility.
Oh, yeah.
And so some of it's
I
us
bet.
figuring out how to get that capital, how and when to open the next facilities.
Yeah, your facility must be pretty big, right? You have to have kind of a warehouse. Do you stack the vessels and forklift them up? And wow, so fascinating. I'm so happy that you were willing to be on our new little podcast and share all your information.
Big moment, big magic moments.
Yeah.
It's so awesome what you're doing.
Well, thank you for having me. It's really fun to speak with. It's so nice to speak with hospice folks. You're well aware of all the challenges and the ups and downs of death care. And
Definitely are. Is there anything else that you want to add that we missed, or
I encourage people to sign up for our e-newsletter, and if you're excited, you can become a Recompose member. We need people to spread the word. So talking to friends and family about what you want it's hugely powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now Halley can get on her soapbox.
Yep.
Hey, Halley, you got to ask the social work question that you like to ask our guests.
Katrina, do you have your advance directives?
I do.
Yes.
All right. Yay.
Please.
Do you have your pre-compose ready?
I do. I'm paid in full, in fact, with pre-compose. I was the first
Excellent.
member, which seemed fitting.
Of course.
Yeah.
I was looking into that. I probably will do that at some point, but I honestly am a little bit superstitious, which I shouldn't admit this, because I always say that hospice patients who are afraid to get into a hospital bed because they think it'll make them die faster are ridiculous. But yet I am worried if I go ahead and pay for my my burial option, I might be asking for it.
Wow, that is super. We've got all. It's okay.
We'll have to work through that.
Yeah. I'll have to do
I know you've already said your
payment
website
plan. If I do a payment plan, then it's like I can't die before the payments are completed.
We've got payment
that's
plans. We've got payment plans starting at $100 a month. So
that's what I need to do. Okay. All right. Yes, your website. Tell us again your
Yes.
Okay,
website.
it's www.recompose.life, Life, life.
All
And
right. And
where
what
can
about the
people find you?
socials?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so we're on social media at Recompose Life. So like Instagram, X, Facebook, and I'm Katrina Spade. One word. You can find me too.
You haven't
TikTok?
come to the dark side
We're
of
not on
TikTok?
TikTok yet. I mean, we don't want to do it half-assed. So we don't have the capacity to do it well, unfortunately. So we're waiting. And now it's like, let's just wait for a minute and see what happens.
Fair.
Yeah, wait and make sure it
Yeah,
stays
exactly.
around.
Well, thank you so much, Katrina. It's been just a joy
Yes.
talking to
Thank you.
you.
It's so
Yes,
nice
so
to meet you,
appreciate you
Holly, and
coming
see you,
on.
Penny. And yeah, take care.
All right. Thank you. Oh, she was such an exciting guest.
She was one that I was looking forward to having on so much because she blew me away at that conference last fall.
I am
She's
sad I
so,
didn't get to hear that conference, and I
oh,
thought I knew things, and then she started talking, and I'm like, I need to know all the things.
I know. And she spoke for only 20 minutes at the conference and she covered a variety of, you know, topics regarding the body composting, but there was still so much more that I didn't
Yeah,
that I didn't know, and
you asked great questions. I'm glad.
it's fascinating. Well, you did too. You had some really good questions. I loved the exemptions. That didn't even occur to me. I never even thought like, oh, there might be people who can't be body composted for one reason or another, and it sounds like there aren't really a lot of exemptions.
It sounds like it's pretty rare, and I think some
Yeah.
of the other ones do have a little more exemptions, especially on the weight limit, which the reason I think of that, of course, is I have had that issue with whole body donation, and having a weight limit. So as the social
Oh,
worker, I'm thinking about when I'm talking to patients and families, what are your options? Well, there may be some that you don't have, so let's not waste time on those.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I just love it. I just think it's great. And I have already told my husband where to take me, and I just need to sign up for the pre-compose on a payment plan so I won't cause myself to die faster by planning my own burial.
I know. I need to get on it. I'm going to wait till I get finished paying off this new bed, and that'll be my next monthly cost.
Then you'll pay off your final bed, your final resting place.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. That was
All
such a
right.
great
2 more
episode.
episodes
Yeah,
till
2
the end of the
more.
season.
Yes.
All right. Until then, remember to live.
Because someday we will all be dead, and we might even be dead and in a box being composted by microbes.
We hope so.